It is Championship Drive. Who's in? Presented by AT&T 5G. Week 7 of the college football season in the books, and was it ever an eventful one? Over the next 30 minutes, our roundtable discussion will tell you who we believe is currently in the college football playoff. And to do that, we have the best panel of experts in the game, beginning with Heather Dinich.
Kevin, of course you know I have all of the answers, but the truth is we need the Big Ten to come back now to make sense of these rankings, because clearly North Carolina is not number 5. But who is? Let's add Ohio State, Penn State back into the mix so that we could get a real picture of these playoff contenders. Rod, what do you think?
Heather, let's be honest. The suspense about the title game is over. It is Alabama, Clemson for the 3rd time in this saga, and I'm here for it. These are clearly the 2 best teams. 2016, we had Bama winning. 2017, Clemson won, and the 3rd one will settle this nonsense. We'll know which program is better. Greg, you know I'm right.
Come on, Rod. What's a college football playoff without a little group of 5 love? How about BYU, who's undefeated, and worst case scenario, just looking at how their schedule sets up, they might be 9-1 at season's end. Guys, can we please find a matchup for BYU so they can prove just how good they are? They crushed Houston. Give me a Power 5 team. Whoever finishes runner-up in the SEC, I want them to play BYU on Championship Saturday.
I like it,
What do you
Greg.
think, Kevin?
I like it very much. I'm going to keep it very simple. Clemson's the best team in college football, and it's because they have Trevor Lawrence and no one else does. Forget the video game numbers he put up yesterday. Every single one of this guy's games has been played as a top 4 team, and his only loss came in last year's national championship game. After he wins the Heisman and he's taken number 1 in the NFL draft, we will look back on his career as the greatest in the history of college football as a quarterback. Clemson has him, and no one else does. Who's in, who's out, and who hurt their chances yesterday? It's all ahead on Championship Drive. Who's in?
Welcome to Championship Drive. Who's in? Presented by AT&T 5G.
The major storylines from Week 7. Nick Saban coached, 2 beat 3, and Bama beat Georgia again. Who exactly was it with the number 1 defense, right? The Tide forced 3 turnovers. They hung 41 on the Dogs in a 41-28 win in Tuscaloosa. Meantime, the Irish win ugly. Hey, everyone loves them, right? But there ain't exactly a ton of sex appeal after that 12-7 win over Louisville yesterday. Ian Book ran for a touchdown, but he had just 106 yards through the air. They are 4-0, but there are a lot of buts there. As for North Carolina, they had a case of the drops late, missed out on a chance to finish an improbable comeback, and dropped a crushing game against Florida State. They fell behind 31-7 at the half, never recovered, and so that is a big L in the loss column. So, given what they've done so far and what lies ahead, Rod, what is the path for North Carolina to get back in the discussion?
Kevin, I love what Mack Brown has done there, and he's done it way ahead of schedule, but the playoff, they're done. I mean, if you think about what's ahead for them, they still have to face Notre Dame, Miami, and possibly Clemson in a championship game. The committee's been clear over the years. 2 losses, you're not coming in. And I don't see any way they navigate that schedule and get there. Yeah, there's a possibility, but I don't see how in the world that happens. I think they're out as of now.
Yeah, guys, I just don't think that they're good enough. If you looked at what happened in that game, clearly they're not ready for prime time yet. That's not to take away the strides that that program has made under Mack Brown, because clearly they're much better. But when you look at quarterback Sam Howell and the entire team, it was too little, too late. And you're talking about against a Florida State team that has really struggled. So, you know, I think if you take a miracle and have a 1-loss UNC team that wins the ACC championship, of course they're going to be considered. I just don't think they're good enough to get to that point.
And Heather, at this point, North Carolina's a dangerous team. That's what they are. They still have an elite quarterback. They have elite weapons at both running back and at wide receiver. But at this moment in their program's trajectory, are they yet up to playoff caliber? No, they're not. They're inconsistent. And I think it really comes on the defensive side of the football, where they're growing, where they're young, but still not quite to the level that we would come to expect from a team that's going to be week in, week out, ready for prime time. I think they're getting there, and the fact that we're even having this conversation midway through Mac Brown's second season is truly remarkable. But I think here, maybe a year from now, maybe 2 years from now, that's when we'll really be talking about North Carolina as a legitimate playoff contender. But here in 2020, it's just a little bit early. And I think the only reason why they were even in the mix and even up that high in the ranking is because it's by a process of elimination from teams that we just don't know a whole lot about, and the fact that the Big Ten right now is absent in the top 5.
I think it's interesting. The bad news is that they have Notre Dame and Miami and possibly Clemson still on the schedule. But that's also the good news. Maybe they do have a chance to get back into the good graces of the committee. We keep it in the ACC and continue on here with your AT&T 5G best performer from Saturday. How could it possibly be anyone other than Trevor Lawrence, right? 404 yards passing, 5 touchdowns, and it essentially came in 30 minutes of football. He led Clemson to their biggest road victory since they pounded Furman to dust pre-World War I, 73-7. He set virtually every single game passing record in that game and made the mortal sin of throwing an interception for the first time in nearly a year. Anyway, when we come back, so you'll want to talk Bama Georgia.
Who's in? Presented by AT&T 5G.
Kev, Heather, Rod, and Greg back with you on Championship Drive. Who's in? Without further ado, we want to get everyone's top 6 teams with the reminder that we're only including teams who have played football games so far in 2020. Rod, you're up first.
Well, Kevin, I really wanted to have Clemson, Alabama, and others, but you made me list 6. And so this is what I have. I have the 6 listed there: Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, Notre Dame, BYU, Texas A&M. Alabama jumps to number 1 because they've played tougher competition than Clemson has. Heather, who you got?
Well, close, but I have Clemson, Alabama, Georgia, Notre Dame, A&M, and Oklahoma State. I have Clemson number 1 because of all those teams, they are the only one in the top 5 in both offensive and defensive efficiency.
All right, guys, I like the list, but where's the love for the group of 5? I got Clemson at 1, still Trevor Lawrence elite. Bama, Notre Dame, Oklahoma State, who can play defense in the Big 12, BYU, and Cincinnati rounding out my top 6, Kevin.
Greg and Heather, I've got a bone to pick with you. Look, are you telling me that Georgia is not even in your top 6? We're talking, this is supposed to be about the best teams in college football, not the best resumes. Are you telling me that Georgia is not a better football team, Greg, than Oklahoma State, BYU, or Cincinnati?
I'm saying right now that Georgia has major question marks at the quarterback position. And in 2020, I am genuinely concerned about teams that have question marks at that spot. More so than maybe any other year, because of the teams that you're playing against, they all have firepower. So what does Oklahoma State, BYU, and Cincinnati have that right now Georgia doesn't have? That's a difference-making quarterback.
How do you have Oklahoma State at number 4? Have you actually seen them play? Put on the Tulsa tape, week 1.
I have.
Oklahoma State is number 4? Seriously? I mean, I get BYU. I mean, we got to give them some love because Zach Wilson's playing better than anybody else out there, and they're a really good team. But Oklahoma State at 4? Seriously?
It's as much, Rod, it's as much about their conference. Right now, I think they are in a great position to not just run the table, but get through the Big 12 slate relatively unscathed. Now, I think they're one of the few teams that actually have really high-quality personnel on the defensive side of the football, and I still think the offense, while it was, week 1, a major work in progress, found their footing a little bit the last time we saw them take the field. So I have the feeling that I'm buying low a little bit on Oklahoma State, and then we're going to see them rise a little bit more as the weeks go along. But it's really as much about the fact that the Big 12, everyone else, I'm taking Oklahoma State. And if you win your Power 5 league with 1 or 0 losses, you're in the college football playoff. So I'm banking on the long run and
tell
kind of
that
just
to the
the supporting
Pac-12
cast that the Cowboys are navigating.
But Greg, here's the thing, and you said it. They can get through that schedule easily. The reason is because the Big 12 isn't very good, and it's strength of conference this year, not strength of schedule, because there's no non-conference games for that committee to look at. So at the end of the day, how many ranked opponents is Oklahoma State really going to beat for that committee to evaluate?
And that's a fair point, guys. Look,
Probably not many.
That's a fair point. Look, I want to take the heat off Greg for a minute here. We're all jumping on Greg for a minute here. Rod, I want to talk to you for a minute here. Clemson wins its game 73-7 yesterday, and you say that's not good enough for them to stay at number one. You have Bama ahead of them. Explain that.
Yeah, because Alabama played the third best team in the country and pretty much dominated the second half. Look, I think Clemson's great. Don't get me wrong. So we're splitting hairs here. But the fact that Alabama has played a tougher schedule means a lot more to me. So I give them the boost over Clemson right now. And look, like I said earlier, we're going to get those two in the championship game, and being 1 or 2 really only matters for the color of the jersey you get to wear in that game.
Heather, why are you keeping Alabama ahead of Clemson ahead of Alabama?
Well, I think because they're the more complete team. And when you look at what they did offensively yesterday, they are eye-popping in terms of the numbers that they were able to put up. I mean, they have it at every position. Mac Jones is outstanding. And then you've got the wide receivers. And then you've got Najee Harris. And it's just everywhere there's an option offensively. Now, they were able to do it against the Georgia defense we were all drooling over for the first couple of weeks. But when you look at Clemson and you look at what they have done on both sides of the ball, and I realize you can certainly call
Heather,
their schedule into strength, but to do it...
Clemson's best win is where? Yeah. Clemson's best win is where?
Well, I can tell
Miami.
you that.
Yeah,
Miami's a good win.
BYU.
Miami's a good win.
Unlike...
Well, Miami's on the come, Greg. Come on, we know.
Here's this is why I would 100% support Heather in her discussion, because Clemson's the one team so far this year that hasn't at any point looked vulnerable. Like at what moment has Bama looked vulnerable? Well, their defense looked pretty gettable against Ole Miss. So don't get me wrong. Like, I think it's 6 and 1, half dozen the other. But Clemson has controlled and dominated on both lines of scrimmage and really on both sides of the ball throughout the course of their first few games. And Miami, I still think, is a pretty good opponent, Rod, even though I know it might not be the same level as what Georgia might be.
Yeah. No, that's a good argument. I can see some of that. But again, when I just look at who have they beaten, what Alabama has done has been more impressive than Clemson. When you look at the resume in that sense, I don't disagree that they've been more complete on the field. And Alabama still has to answer for that poor defensive showing against Mississippi. But hey, you know, I hear where you're coming from.
But this whole conversation, guys, is why I told you right off the bat, we need Ohio State and Penn State to come on back into this to make sense. So we're not talking about Oklahoma State and BYU anymore.
And there was Heather's opening salvo, and I think she's right on the money. We need some more people to join the party, and we'll get that beginning next Saturday. All right, we go into the Samsung QLED film room for our top 4 plays of yesterday. Rod, how about let's give a little bit of love for the defensive guys. Kansas and West Virginia second quarter. Mile Kendrick's pass going to be intercepted by the big fella, Darius Stills.
Who says that big guys don't have athleticism? Look at the eye focus there, and then the dive there and the soft hands. Go ahead, big fella. Show them that defensive linemen are athletes too.
There you go. West Virginia fell behind early but came back to win. Number 3, NC State and Duke. Greg, you've thrown a couple of these. Nice passes, Bailey Hockman, but look at the catch by Thayer Thomas.
And how about the non-catch by the Duke defender? That thing is pretty amazing. It was perfectly thrown ball to the Duke defender. Great catch, though. Unbelievable.
NC State wins by 11. South Carolina, Auburn, fourth quarter. Rod, Colin Hill, Shi Smith with one hand.
Yeah, I've seen Shi do this before. He's a great receiver, the one hand, the focus and concentration. But, Kevin, this is the best one of the weekend.
Yeah, Greg, break this one down. Treylon Burks in the back of the end zone.
I can't explain this because it defies physics. It's amazing.
Football.
Absolutely amazing.
Fabulous throw by Felipe Franks. Fabulous catch by Treylon Burks in the Arkansas win. How about the job the Razorbacks have done in 2020? All right, that was the good side of things. When we come back, you get the bad with the good. Ugly scene in Memphis yesterday with UCF. Plus, we're going to talk about the Big Ten. Where exactly do they fit in? And how many teams exactly does the college football playoff predictor have with a shot at the college football playoff? That's coming up next. Back on Championship Drive, who's in? We showed you the top 4. We've got to give you the bottom 4, right? Greg, UCF and Memphis closing seconds, missed field goal by UCF, so Memphis hangs on. And then what happens on the sideline?
Oh, I just hate this, man. I mean, hey, emotions are high. but I don't like seeing teammates going after other teammates, man. Let's get this thing together, pick each other up, don't tear each other down. Hope they can get that ironed out in the future.
Well said. All right, BYU, Houston, third quarter. Cougars punting the ball. Houston calls for a fair catch. Rod inside the 1.
The rule has not changed in 50, 60 years. Put your feet on the 10-yard line and don't back up.
Heather, how about some fan reactions we caught yesterday?
You know what? I love this. If that's the kind of game you're at, you got issues. Your team has issues.
Exactly. And speaking of issues, well, Georgia Tech had him defensively, right? Hunter Helms to Ajo. No one from Georgia Tech can tackle him. 4 missed tackles before he gets in the end zone. And, of course, we know that the bottom 4 for Georgia Tech includes a 73-7 defeat. All-State playoff predictor. This is all about the Big Ten, who gets going next week, thank God. And as we look at the conference, this is the only one with 2 teams better than a 40% chance to actually reach the college football playoff. The only conference, not the SEC, not the Pac-12, not the ACC, it's the Big Ten. And yet, Heather, there is zero wiggle room here, given when they're starting the season and how jam-packed this schedule is going to be. If there are games that are actually going to be wiped out here due to COVID, how do we go about viewing body of work for teams in the Big Ten?
Well, that's exactly right. 8 games in 8 weeks in a conference championship game, and they signed up for this, and they knew that that could be a possibility. And you add into that, if a player tests positive for COVID-19, he is out for 21 days. So that's a lot. They're hoping the contact tracing is significantly decreased with daily antigen tests confirmed by a PCR. But look, if you miss a game and you play fewer games, that is certainly going to be taken into consideration when comparing teams like the ACC and SEC that will have played 8 or 9 games by the time the first rankings come out on November 24th. American Athletic Conference Commissioner Bob Bowlesby, guys, told me the number of games should matter because you remember in the first year of the playoff when the Big 12 did not have its conference championship game, and that was such a big issue because they didn't have that, quote, extra data point. Well, now you might be missing a lot of those extra data points.
You know, Heather, you're right. There's no margin for error. And we know this from everything that the experts are telling us. The projections are that the COVID-19 issues are going to get worse, that when November hits, it's going to be a bigger problem. There is virtually no way the Big Ten is going to get through the season without losing some games. We've even seen the uptick in the SEC already. Look, this is why I've been an advocate of having 6 teams in the playoff, because it's really hard to do that comparison in this kind of a truncated season, you know, with the virus and everything. Why not just take the 5 conference champs and then +1, and that way you don't have to make that comparison, because the committee has been clear for the last several years. The more data they have, the better they can make a decision. And you're going to have a discrepancy of 3, maybe 4 games between the Big Ten and the SEC and the ACC. And I think that's a problem.
Well, Pac-12 Commissioner
Rod, I couldn't agree with you more.
Scott
And I have been a strong supporter of I've been a strong supporter of the 4-team playoff format. I love the 4-team. I don't think we need to expand it in a normal year because everyone's playing on the same playing field for the most part as it pertains to the amount of games played. But this year is not normal.
That's
it's
right.
Everything but normal, frankly. And it's going to be very difficult to even evaluate the teams. And you say, well, we need the 4 best. Well, what if your best player's out for 21 days and they miss 3 games, yet you still win, but you don't win pretty, and next thing you know, it impacts the way your team is perceived. So I think it's one of those situations. Keep it in conference. That's what all the conferences decide to do for the most part. Keep it in conference. Give the 5 conference champions, like Rod alluded to. I think it's a great way of ironing out some of the issues that might be presented in the college football playoff. I do get concerned about putting the toothpaste back in the tube for future years, because how do you have 6 this year and then go back to 4 in future years? But obviously that's been something the committee shot down at this moment. But they do, I think, need to identify that possibility.
Greg, I'm on the same page with you. I think 4 is the right number here. Greg, I want to get back to you on this here. Let's talk about outliers, all right? And you hate to include any of these teams with that label, but for the moment, let's call them outliers, teams on the outside looking in. Go about making a case, Greg, for teams like Cincinnati, BYU, SMU, even Texas A&M.
Well, A&M is We just had them a couple weeks ago. That's a really good football team that finally found their identity. They're really physical along the offensive line. They're capable running the football. So I think A&M's one of those teams. They'll be favored in just about every game from here on out. So you could find an A&M team that's 9-1 at season's end. But the team I love right now that's a real outlier is BYU. They just aren't going to be given the opportunity to play against a top-tier competition. The only game that might be challenging in the remainder of the schedule is the game against Boise State, and that's still a few weeks away. They're going to be favored probably heavily in just about every game they have remaining. What I love about them is this is a mature football team that wins at the line of scrimmage with a difference-making and dynamic quarterback in Zach Wilson with good weapons on the outside. This team is built to play in the Power 5 and to beat Power 5 opponents. I just really wish they could have that opportunity.
Texas A&M will be the third best team in the SEC. So BYU and Cincinnati, I'd like to see them schedule a game and get one of those teams in there. That's the way I see it with the outliers.
Without those opportunities, guys, in the eyes of the selection committee, those group of 5 teams are an absolute long shot this year, and they just won't stack up to the conference champions in the Power 5.
And it's a shame in the case of BYU because they had great games on the schedule before COVID. As always, make your voice heard at twitter.com/SportsCenter and vote in the Capital One fan vote. For Heather Dittich, Rod Gilmore, and Greg McElroy, I'm Kevin Connors. We'll see you back here next Sunday.